Come with me. I'll give you the same cake for less. You're stealing my customers after everything I taught you? Business isn't about friendship. It's about who wins. Please don't make me choose between both of you. You didn't build this. You stole every piece of it. Why build one when I can take yours? Please come with me. Okay. No, wait!
What if I told you that the person who smiled at you every single morning, the one who ate your food, held your secrets, and called you her sister, was sharpening a knife behind your back the whole time? That was my story. And I wish I could tell you I saw it coming. I wish I could tell you there were signs, that something in my stomach warned me, that my spirit shifted the way it does when danger is near. But there was nothing. There was only Danielle, laughing, hugging, calling me her person, and me, foolish and full of love, believing every word. My name is Vivian, and I built something with my own 2 hands. I remember the early days like they were branded into my skin. I was 24 years old, fresh out of a failed office job that paid me barely enough to feed myself, standing in my mother's kitchen at 2 in the morning with flour on my face and fire in my chest. My mother had passed the year before, and all she left me was her old mixer, her handwritten recipe book, and the stubborn belief that a woman with talent and discipline could carve her name into the world. So I carved. I started small. Trays of chin-chin sold in transparent nylon bags, birthday cakes ordered through WhatsApp, small chops delivered on a bicycle I borrowed from my neighbor's teenage son. Every naira I made, I reinvested. Every late night felt like a prayer. Every customer who called back felt like God himself was confirming that I was on the right path. By the time I was 28, Vivian's Bakes was not just a name, it was a landmark. My shop sat on Allen Avenue, painted in warm cream and gold, with the smell of fresh bread and caramel drifting out of the windows every morning. People drove across Lagos just to buy my layered vanilla sponge. Corporate companies placed standing orders for my event platters. Mothers knew my number by heart for their children's birthdays. I had 5 employees, 2 industrial ovens, and a reputation that had taken me years of sacrifice to build. I was proud. I had every right to be proud. And Danielle was my best friend since secondary school. She was the maid of honor I never used because I hadn't married yet. She was the person I called when I was anxious, when business was slow, when I doubted myself at midnight. She was the woman I thanked in every interview I gave, the one I called my backbone. She had started coming to help me at the bakery on weekends, unpaid, just for love, or so she said. She said she was learning. She said watching me work inspired her. I believed her. I even felt proud of that. But looking back now, the questions she asked were never casual. They were surgical. Vivian, where exactly do you get this butter? Is it the same supplier for the cream? Auntie Shade's company orders how many trays per event, and what's your contract arrangement? How do you handle it when an employee misbehaves? Do you have it written down somewhere? I thought she was curious. I thought she was growing. I was feeding a wolf and calling it friendship. The morning everything broke open started like any other Tuesday. I was in the shop by 5:30, tying my apron when my most loyal staff member, Blessing, walked in with a face that looked like she had been carrying something heavy all night. She didn't say good morning. She just looked at me and said, "Madam, I need to show you something." And she placed her phone on my table. There it was, on Google Maps, freshly listed with a 5-star rating already loaded. Danielle's Delights, Allen Avenue, Lagos, directly across the street. The air left my body. I stood there staring at that screen and I felt something I had never felt in my adult life. A silence so loud it hurt. Not anger, not yet. Just a hollow, ringing silence that sat in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. Danielle's Delights. The name alone was a declaration. She had not gone down the road. She had not set up in Lekki or Ikeja or Surulere, where the market was wide and the city was big enough for both of us. She had opened directly across the street from me, on my road, targeting my customers. She had walked into my life like a student, learned everything I knew, and then built a weapon from it and aimed it at my face. I sat down slowly on the stool near my worktop. Blessing was still standing there, watching me carefully the way people watch someone they are afraid might shatter. "How long has it been up?" I asked. "It's been since last week," she said quietly. "But today is when they put the sign outside." I turned to the window and I saw it. Across the street, workers were lifting a large banner, yellow and white, bold lettering, "Danielle's Delight, baked with love." A woman in an apron stood outside directing them with a smile on her face. That woman was Danielle. She had not even told me. She had not called. She had not sent a message. She had woken up that morning and decided to stand across the street from everything I had built and open her arms to steal what was mine. I did not cry. I want you to understand that, because what I felt was deeper than tears. It was the kind of pain that lives in the bones, the kind that comes not from losing something, but from realizing you never had what you thought you had. I thought about all the times I had sat Danielle down in this very kitchen. I had given her my supplier contacts, Alhaji Wasa in Trade Fair, Mama Chioma in Ojota, people I had spent years finding, testing, negotiating prices with. I had printed out those contacts and handed them to her on a piece of paper because she said she was building a reference file just to understand how the business works. I had shown her my pricing structure. I had explained my profit margins. I had walked her through my entire customer database, not because she asked directly, but because she was always around when I was working. She had watched me enter orders into my phone. She had sat beside me when I called Auntie Shade's company to confirm a bulk order. She had seen everything, and I had let her see everything because she was my friend, because I was proud of what I built and I wanted to share it. Because when you love someone, you do not guard yourself from them. You open the door and say, "Come in, look around, I trust you." That trust had made me a fool. What made it worse, what made my stomach turn into something cold and hard was what Blessing told me next. "Madam," she said, her voice dropping low, "Danielle called me last week." I turned slowly. She offered me a salary increase and a supervisor title if I moved to work for her. She said she already had most of the customer list and she just needed experienced hands. I blinked. "Most of the customer list?" Blessing nodded, her eyes wet at the edges. "I didn't go, but Emeka and Sandra did." Emeka, my head baker of 3 years. Sandra, who handled my client communications and knew every single standing order, every corporate account, every personal client note I had ever made. They had both walked out Friday evening and said they were pursuing other opportunities. This had not been a coincidence. This had been a plan, a coordinated, deliberate, calculated plan, and Danielle had been executing it quietly for months while sitting at my table, eating my food and telling me she loved me. I walked to the window and looked across the street. Danielle was laughing now, talking to one of the banner workers. She looked happy, unburdened, light. And in that moment, I made myself a promise. Not a promise of revenge, not yet, but a promise that I would not break. I would not fall. I would not close. Whatever she had planned, I was still standing and I would remain standing. But the ground beneath me was shaking, and I would be a liar if I told you I was afraid. If this story is already hitting something in your chest, something you have lived or watched someone live, subscribe to this channel right now. Every week, we tell true life African stories like this. Here is what people do not tell you about betrayal. They do not tell you about the ones who knew and stayed quiet. Because after Blessing told me about the calls Danielle had made to my staff, I started asking questions. Gentle questions at first, then harder ones. And slowly, like a wound being unwrapped, the full picture began to reveal itself. My other remaining staff member, Fumi, admitted that she had overheard Daniel on the phone 2 months ago in the back room, asking someone to make sure the client list was backed up properly. Fumi had not understood what it meant at the time. She had thought it was Daniel helping me with some task. She had not mentioned it. My friend Tola, a woman I had known for 6 years, who attended my shop lunch, who referred customers to me, called me that week and confessed that Daniel had approached her a month ago, asking if she would become an ambassador for a new bakery she was opening. Tola had said no, but she had also not called me, not warned me, not said a single word. I didn't want to cause trouble, Tola said over the phone, her voice apologetic. I thought maybe it was nothing. I didn't want to be in the middle. I held the phone to my ear and breathed. This is the part no one prepares you for. The loneliness of being betrayed and then discovering that people around you saw pieces of it and chose their comfort over your protection. They were not your enemies, but they were not your soldiers either. And in war, neutrality is its own kind of wound. Meanwhile, across the street, Daniel's shop was gaining momentum. She had launched with a promotional offer, 10% off all orders in the first 2 weeks. My customers, some of whom I had served for years, began crossing the streets. Not all of them, but enough for me to feel it. Auntie Shade's company, my single biggest corporate client, the one who spent close to 300,000 naira with me every quarter, sent me a polite message that week saying they were exploring options. I found out later that Sandra, my former communications staff, who had left with Daniel, had personally called their procurement officer and offered them a lower price using a quote structure she had seen on my internal document. She had sold my numbers to my competitor, to the woman I had taught everything. I remember sitting in my bakery the night of that discovery, after my remaining staff had gone home, the ovens cooling around me, the smell of vanilla still in the air. I remember running my fingers over the scratched surface of my wooden worktop, the same worktop where Daniel and I had once laughed until we cried, frosting cupcakes at midnight for a rush order, singing old fella songs and telling each other we were going to be great. I had meant that. I had believed we were going to be great together. I pressed my palms flat on the wood and I let myself feel it fully. The humiliation, the loneliness, the grief of losing a friendship I had poured years of myself into. I let the tears come. I am not ashamed of those tears. They were real and they were earned. But I also made a decision in that kitchen. I was not going to let this destroy me. Because there was something Daniel did not understand. She had stolen my recipes. She had taken my contacts. She had poached my staff and circled my clients like a hawk. But there was one thing she could not steal. One thing that could never be copied or transferred or downloaded from someone else. She could not steal my character. She could not steal the woman I was when no one was watching. And I was about to remind this city exactly who Vivian was. But first, the storm was going to get worse before it got better. Much worse. Within a month of Daniel's opening, I had lost 30% of my revenue. 30%. Do you know what that means for a small business? It means payroll becomes a prayer. It means you stare at your account balance at the end of the month and calculate how many days you can survive if things do not turn around. It means your remaining staff sees the tension in your shoulders and begins to wonder if they should start looking elsewhere too. I was fighting on every front simultaneously. I went back to every client who had left and I called them, not to beg, but to reconnect. I reminded them of our history. I asked them what had changed for them. Some were honest. Several said Daniel had offered lower prices. One corporate client said he had been told by a reliable source that I was planning to close my shop. I felt a cold chill run down my neck when I heard that. A reliable source. Someone was spreading rumors that I was shutting down, trying to accelerate the collapse by making clients believe it was already happening. I did not need to guess who that source was. I also began receiving strange feedback from potential new clients, people who had been referred to me but who came in confused, saying they had seen almost identical cakes at the bakery across the street at a lower price. When I looked at what Danielle was producing, I nearly went blind with disbelief. She was not just using my recipes, she was recreating my signature designs. My layered mango cream cake, which I had developed over 8 months of testing, which had been featured in a food blog the year before, was on her menu. Word for word, the same description, the same layers, the same decoration style. She had not even tried to hide it. I consulted a lawyer. He told me that without formal documentation of my original recipes and designs, a legal case would be difficult. Painful truth, expensive lesson. I had never thought to project my work legally because it had never occurred to me that the person who would steal it was the one sleeping on my couch. My mother's mixer broke that week. The old, heavy machine she had left me, the one I started everything with, the one I used to make my first cake, the first tray of chin-chin. The motor gave out with a grinding sound that made Blessing run in from the next room. I stood over it and I thought of my mother. I thought about what she would say if she could see me right now. She would say, "Vivian, get up." She would not say it gently. My mother was not a gentle woman. She was a strong woman. There's a difference. So I got up. I repaired the mixer. I called new suppliers, I revised my menu, added items Danielle didn't have, things that required skill levels she had not yet developed. I reached out to food bloggers and invited them to my shop for a complimentary tasting. I posted behind-the-scenes videos on social media that showed my process, my genuine, years-built, hard-earned process, and the response from the community was immediate and warm. People could feel the authenticity. People always can. But it was still hard, it was still bleeding. And then came the morning that changed everything. Emeka, my former head baker, the one who had left with Daniel, called me. His voice was tight, uncomfortable, the voice of a man holding something he didn't know how to put down. "Madam Vivian," he said, "I need to talk to you. There are things I know, things that happened, and I think people need to hear the truth." I gripped the phone. "Talk to me," I said, and he began to talk. Emeka talked for 45 minutes. By the time he finished, I was no longer gripping the phone. I was sitting completely still, my eyes dry, my mind running fast and quiet like deep water before a waterfall. He told me everything. He told me that before Danielle opened her shop, she had been photographing pages from my private recipe book, the handwritten one I kept in the locked drawer of my office. He told me that Sandra had helped her copy entire sections of my client database, including order histories, pricing notes, and the personal preferences I kept on file for long-term clients. Things like which client was allergic to nuts, which family always ordered an extra tier for photography, which corporate account preferred delivery by 8 a.m. Intimate operational details that could only have come from someone who had access to my inner workings. He told me that Danielle had been planning this for at least 8 months before she opened. 8 months. While she sat with me, while she laughed with me, while she told me she loved me. She had been building a parallel business from the bones of mine, and she had done it with surgical patience. Emeka had left her employ because he had discovered something that disturbed him even more. Danielle had been approached by a food industry journalist who was doing a piece on small bakery businesses in Lagos. In preparation for the interview, Danielle had shown the journalist a portfolio of her work, and inside that portfolio were photographs of cakes that Emeka knew he had made in my kitchen. She had presented them as her own original creations. He had confronted her about it. She told him to mind his business or find another job. He had found another job, but he had also kept screenshots. The journalist, when Emeka quietly reached out and told her what she had been shown, was furious. She was a woman of integrity and she felt she had been used to launder a lie. She reached out to me directly and asked if I was willing to share my side of the story. I agreed. The article that came out 2 weeks later was not a small piece. It ran in one of Lagos's most widely read digital platforms, and it spread across Instagram and WhatsApp faster than fire in dry grass. The journalist had done her job thoroughly. She had spoken to former clients, cross-referenced dates, and even contacted Alhaji Musa, my supplier, who confirmed that Danielle had come to him with my name and contact specifically and presented herself as someone working in collaboration with me. She had used my name, my reputation, to establish herself with my suppliers. The community's reaction was swift and devastating for Danielle. Within 72 hours, Auntie Sade's company called me and reinstated our contract. 3 other corporate clients reached out and returned. My social media following tripled as people shared the story with the caption, "This is why we support the original." Customers came to my shop not just to buy, but to show solidarity. The line went out the door on a Wednesday morning, which had never happened before in my 6 years of business. And across the street, the silence at Danielle's Delights was loud enough to hear. Sandra quietly resigned from her. 2 of the 3 employees Danielle had hired using my contacts stopped showing up. The corporate clients Danielle had poached began quietly returning. Her promotional offers dried up because the margins she had promised were built on a stolen structure, not her own business acumen. And without a strong foundation, the model was already cracking. But the real consequence, the one that mattered most, came from somewhere Danielle had not expected: her own family. Her mother, a woman I knew and respected for years, called me one afternoon. She was weeping. She told me she had not known. She told me she was ashamed. She told me that Danielle's father had seen the article and had called a family meeting, and that Danielle was sitting in the consequences of that meeting right now. I did not feel joy when she told me that. I want to be clear about that. I felt something quieter, something more like the stillness after a storm, the feeling of a wound beginning finally to close. 3 months later, I stood outside my bakery on a Tuesday morning and I looked at the sign above my door. Vivian's Bakes. Same cream and gold, same warm smell drifting out the window, same early morning hum of mixers and the sound of blessings singing softly from the kitchen. But something had changed. Everything had changed. The empty space across the street where Danielle's Delight stood was now boarded up. She had lasted 5 months. Her funding had collapsed, her client base had collapsed, and without the ethical foundation that real business requires, there was nothing left to hold the structure up. A business built on stolen ground cannot stand because the owner does not know how to tend what they never truly built. When the problems came, as problems always do, she had no wisdom to pull from. She had only stolen recipes. She had not stolen the years of learning behind them. I heard through people that Danielle had moved back to her family home. I did not reach out. I had nothing left to say to her. Some seasons of your life are meant to be closed quietly, not with drama, but with the dignity of a door shut firmly and locked from the inside. What I want to tell you, what I need you to hear, if you are watching this and you are someone who is building something, or someone who has been betrayed, or someone who is wondering whether honesty and hard work are still worth anything in this world, is this: your character is your most valuable asset, not your recipe, not your contacts, not your suppliers, not your strategy, your character. Danielle had access to every technical element of my business, but she did not have access to me, to the discipline that woke me up at 5 a.m. when I was exhausted, to the integrity that made my customers tell the truth when a cake did not come out right instead of delivering it anyway, to the warmth that made my customers feel like family rather than transactions. That is why they came back. Not because of loyalty programs or discounts, because they trusted me. And trust is built slowly, with consistent, quiet honesty, and it cannot be downloaded from someone else's phone. The second thing I want to say to you is this: guard your gifts carefully. I do not mean become cold or suspicious of everyone who wants to learn from you. Generosity is a grace, and you should not let one Danielle seal your heart against the world. But there is a difference between mentoring someone and opening the vault. There is a difference between teaching and transferring. Be wise about where you place your trust. Not everyone who sits with you is sitting for you. And the third thing, perhaps the most important thing, do not let betrayal make you bitter. Let it make you sharper. I did not destroy Danielle. The truth destroyed what she built. I simply kept building mine. Today, Vivian's Bakes has expanded. I have a second location in Victoria Island. I have a formal partnership with 2 event planning companies. I have a team of 8, and I have legal documentation, trademarks, signed supplier agreements, formal client contracts, protecting every piece of what I have built. My mother's mixer sits on a shelf in my office. I got it repaired and framed it in a way, a reminder of where I started and what I survived. Sometimes I stand at my window early in the morning before the staff arrive, looking out at the empty space across the street, and I feel something I never expected to feel. Gratitude. Not for the betrayal, never for that, but for the betrayal forced me to become stronger, smarter, unshakable. She took the recipes. She could not take the baker. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today.